Dad, what's wrong with the telly?
We are scientists. We are politicians. We are the experts. We are your leaders. We rule over you. Do not question if there is a God, because we tell you there is no God. All you are is simply a freak of nature. You are an animal. You evolved by chance. Nothing about you is special. Nothing about you is real. All you are is simply a spectacle of a freak of nature. The Earth is not the center of the universe. It is not even at the center of the Milky Way galaxy which we created. It is not even the center of the heliocentric model which we have presented to you. We are the scientists. We are the experts. We know what's best for you.
The ancients viewed their world as a snow globe. It's essentially a flat Earth, say a disk, covered by a dome. And we call this in English a firmament. And in the firmament is where all the stars and the planets were hung.
Almost all ancient cultures believed their universe existed in a dome similar to this one. And they never questioned who created it.
The ancients assumed that there was a god or gods responsible for the creation and the maintenance of the universe.
The flat Earth model is a working model. It's by no means definitive due to the nature of this massive cover-up. For the past 500 years, we've been completely buying into the Copernicus heliocentric model, but what we do know about the flat Earth is based on the azimuthal equidistant map that seems to be working out. This map goes as far back as the year 1000 and possibly earlier, now used as an official map by the US Geological Survey and also as the official logo for the United Nations. Is this our real home being hidden from us in plain sight? I think it is. The first thing a lot of people say is, where's the edge? Well, look at this map where Antarctica is a 360-degree ice barrier that holds the water in. These ice walls are real and they stand 150 feet above the surface of the water. Then you need to understand that there is no independent access to Antarctica. Average people can only go there on a guided tour. It has no towns, no cities, and no permanent residences. What's past the 150-foot ice wall is anyone's guess. How far the ice extends, how it terminates, and what exists beyond it. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by 12 nations and more later on, states that Antarctica is for peaceful purposes only. No military activities, just scientific research and government exploration. Expeditions by any party must be discussed in advance. It's the longest and most successful treaty between nations. The treaty also states that there are ships, stations, and equipment to ensure compliance of the treaty. Sounds like military activity to me. Anyway, so this azimuthal equidistant map appears to be correct for the most part. Over the centuries, there's been other maps that look pretty close to it as well. Let's look at an interesting story that was recently in the news that supports this flat map. A woman gave birth on a flight from Bali to Los Angeles, so the flight made an emergency landing in Alaska. Here's what it would look like on a globe. Now, here's what it would look like on a flat Earth. Which one makes more sense? Exactly.
The idea that God created the universe went largely unchallenged until the Middle Ages, when scientists made a sacrilegious suggestion based on their observations. The sun, not the earth, was at the center of the universe.
It was a paradigm shift. There is now another way to explain the naturally occurring phenomena around us, and this is science.
Since the Middle Ages, scientists have developed sophisticated new theories about the enormity of the universe and our place in it. Theories that often have no room for God.
Okay, so here's the picture of the Earth from space. There it is. Since you were a kid, you've seen this image. But you've never seen it from that point of view. You've never seen that with your eyes from that scale of a model, that point of view, from outside of the planet's surface. But yet your brain has three-dimensionalized, oh yeah, that's the Earth. How? Through repetition. Next image. How do we get to this point of the image? This is fucking funny. I think this is funny. Next image. Well, here's the first image that sold the whole thing. As you can see, that's clearly the universe. I mean, that's clearly the universe. I swear to God. I mean, there's the sun. I mean, I could recognize that thing. It's a bullseye. It's like a planet. It's an egg. Whatever. But there you go. You got each rung, the whole thing. 1482. This is when they came up with this idea. We are on that thing. It's a ball. Hey, we should go to the North and the South Pole. We didn't do it yet. It's a fucking ball. Hey, nobody's even like jumped up high enough to see if it is a ball. You can't do that. We don't have planes yet. It's a ball. You know what? We adopted this whole model like 400 or 500 years before the airplane. 400 years before the airplane, pretty much. Like what, beginning in the 1900s? They went to the North Pole in the 1900s. This is 1482. Nobody went to the top of the globe, to the bottom, or flew up, or built a skyscraper. That's it. It's been a decade since like Columbus hit America. That's it. You had Spinoza, Leibniz. Everybody was fighting to say what the fuck we were on, how much land there really was. Real estate, right? Real estate. The only commodity that appreciates besides art. Right? These are the only things that appreciate. Everything's depreciating except those two. It's funny how these two are going to meet and what I'm going to talk about. Next image. It's funny that we said that this is what we're in right now. This is what we're on before any instrument approved. Until, pause. Can you do it? It's funny, back in the 60s when they went to the moon, this is the first time we actually had like an instrument of flight to actually go high enough to actually fucking check out if what we agreed to 500 years ago was real. So if they were wrong after 500 years, the question is, would they tell you?
Every scholar and major religion in the West accepted Earth's rotundity since at least the time of the ancient Greeks, who, for instance, had noticed that boats disappear bottom first when sailing away, and as you walk north and south, stars pop into and out of view. The misconception that only a few hundred years ago lots and lots of people believed the Earth was flat likely began in the modern era as a sort of insult, well, your people recently thought the Earth was flat, so why should we believe you now? The smear was repeated and published so often it became accepted as historical fact.
The curvature of the Earth horizon model of science! And this blue stuff is like the ocean. And this boat, well, it's like a boat. Anyway, watch. As ships sail away, they don't disappear all at once. No, first, the bottom will disappear. See, the bottom of the ship is gone. Now we can see midway up, and then the whole thing disappears. Now, ships came back. They didn't fall off a table. So people realized that the world is curved. I mean, it's a big curve, but it's curved. So, the process of testing claims, the world is flat, the world is round, is what we call science. Now, if you have a claim that can't be tested, that's what we call pseudoscience. The difference between pseudoscience and regular science is whether or not you can test it. The flat Earth, well, that didn't stand up to tests. The round Earth did. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. The world is round. I'm out of here.
Ship out in the ocean, and the person filming is using a P900 digital camera. Let's take a look at this footage here. Okay, well, it zooms out. And one thing I want to mention before playing the video, just imagine so-called gravity holding down these huge containers on this cargo ship due to supposed gravity, which again is only a theory. Now, take a look at the bottom. You can see the bottom, of course, or the water level of the boat itself. You can see the waves striking the sides. Now, take a look here. Again, zooming out as the cargo ship completely disappears. Gone. Out of sight. Nowhere. I understand this is a little bit elevated, but still, from this perspective, you're not looking around the so-called ball Earth. 100%. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, proof. Again, we live on a flat Earth. Now, let's take a look here, as I shown earlier.
Another scientific proof that they'll come at you with is that ships, as they're disappearing on the horizon, as they get further and further away, the bottom, the hull, will start to disappear before the masthead. And so what's happening is it's slowly going over the curvature of the Earth. It's going over the ball. And this is, Aristotle used this. This has been a proof of the ball Earth for a long time. The ball Earth has been theorized back as far as Pythagoras 2,500 years ago, but it didn't really pick up steam until 500 years ago. But so anyway, yeah, this one is one they use a lot. But in actuality, if you use binoculars, a zoom camera, a telescope, after the ship has completely disappeared over the horizon, you can bring it completely back into view, proving that it hasn't descended over a wall of convex water, but in fact it's just gone beyond your perspective. The horizon line is not the curvature of the ball Earth as you're told. The horizon line is the vanishing line of perspective from your point of view. And that's why as you raise altitude, or on a clearer day, or with a zoom camera, you're able to see further and further along the horizon. It's not a fixed point as it would be on a ball, as they tell you. So again, this is another supposed scientific proof of the ball Earth, but
Destiny's Ball. And speaking of myths, people who think ships are disappearing over the curve in less than 10 miles distance, it's got to work both ways. I mean, if we're on a ball, then when the ship is going away from you on the, let's say, the z-axis, going, you know, from you to a point away from you, and it's rolling over the ball in less than 10 miles, then you should have the exact same effect looking left to right on the x-axis. You should be seeing ships rolling up to the top of the ball and rolling down on the lateral x-axis. You know, I mean, if it's a ball, they got to be rolling both ways, away from you and side to side. We never see that though. You can go to the beach and do a panoramic shot and put a parallel line over it, and from end to end, and this is a lot more than just 5 miles, there's no perceived curvature here. None. Flat as a pancake. And in fact, these are some pictures I took on the beach at Malibu, California. And I went from there way up into the mountains above Pepperdine University and looked out. And I mean, easily there's got to be probably close to 100 miles left to right. The distance on the horizon there, it's got to be, you know, quite a bit there. Put a parallel line over it, flat.
if the Earth were actually a big ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the horizon would be noticeably curved even at sea level, and everything on or approaching the horizon would appear to tilt backwards slightly from your perspective. Distant buildings along the horizon would all look like leaning towers of Pisa falling away from the observer. A hot air balloon taking off, then drifting steadily away from you on a ball Earth would slowly and constantly appear to lean back more and more the farther away it flew, the bottom of the basket coming gradually into view as the top of the balloon disappears from sight. In reality, however, buildings, balloons, trees, people, anything and everything at right angles to the ground or horizon remains so regardless the distance of the observer. B. Chasbro wrote, "The marine horizon, from whatever position it is viewed, always appears to be, and is, in fact, a perfectly level line, and since this appearance is the same in all parts of the world, its surface must be level, and therefore the Earth is a plane."
Hey, Vsauce! Michael here. In 2003, researchers did the measurements and found that Kansas is, in fact, literally flatter than a pancake.
In 2003, 3 university geography professors collaborated in an experiment to prove that the state of Kansas is indeed actually flatter than a pancake. Using topographical geodetic surveys covering over 80,000 square miles, it was determined that Kansas has a flatness ratio of 0.9997 over the entire state, while the average pancake, precisely measured using a confocal laser microscope, comes in at 0.957, making Kansas thereby literally flatter than a pancake.
In 2002, a joint topographical study conducted by the Departments of Geography at Texas State University and Arizona State University used computer models to prove that the state of Kansas is flatter than a pancake. Researchers Mark Fonstad, William Bugach, and Brandon Vogt literally compared the flatness of a pancake to the flatness of Kansas. The same computations have since been used to further demonstrate there are 6 more states, including Florida, that are even flatter, according to the geographers at Kansas State University.
In order to get this globe to look anything close to a rectangle lying flat, I've had to cut it in several places. I've had to stretch it so that the countries are starting to look all wonky. And even still, it's almost impossible to get it to lay flat.
And that right there is the eternal dilemma of map makers. The surface of a sphere cannot be represented as a plane without some form of distortion. That was mathematically proved by this guy a long time ago. Since around the 1500s, mathematicians have set about creating algorithms that would translate the globe into something flat. And to do this, they use a process called projection. Popular rectangular maps use a cylindrical projection. Imagine putting a theoretical cylinder over the globe and projecting each of the points of the sphere onto the cylinder surface. Unroll the cylinder and you have a flat rectangular map. But you could also project the globe onto other objects, and the math used by map makers to project the globe will affect the way the map looks once it's all flattened out. And here's the big problem. Every one of these projections comes with trade-offs in shape, distance, direction, and land area. Certain map projections can either be misleading or very helpful depending on what you're using them for.
Coincidence, someone asked me to map them a 600-foot buffer radius for an unrelated project to this. And I use the city's zoning software. You choose a parcel, click it, type in the radius you want to draw around it, and it'll draw a perfect radius around it, right? And this is the city's proprietary internal software that they let to be open source for developers. So when the city is 465 square miles, well, over 400 square miles, if it was properly projected, like the Mercator projection, you know, when you look at the Mercator projection on a piece of paper, you have give because of the curvature of the Earth, you know, it bends, right? Well, this software, you can zoom in as close as you want on the map, and you'll find every single inch in the entire city accounted for, down to like the width of the sidewalks. You know, if a street is 2 lanes versus 3 lanes wide. The buildings are mapped by their size to the inch on their building permits. But whether you zoom in the most southern part of the city or the most northeastern part of the city, it's all a perfectly flat image. Those inches have to, they're accounted for. They have to exist somewhere. And so either they're making up land that doesn't exist, or there'd be buildings missing on their projection somewhere, or somehow they were able to take 465 square miles and perfectly flatly project it with no curvature whatsoever on a flat surface, which is something no one has yet ever figured out how to do, which is why when we look at the Mercator projection, it actually curves off. So if we were looking at a properly projected flat map of the city of LA, the outer extremities of the city should be scaled the same way that the edges of the Mercator projection. But the crazy thing about this exact software, they've found this land somewhere, and it couldn't possibly exist the way that they project it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The map of the city should look like this in order for it to be perfectly square projected. But somehow they were the first global engineers to be able to project the globe flat and in a perfect 90-degree angle square. And they never knew they did it. Either these buildings, they'd have to delete a couple buildings, or they would have to break it up like that.
So is the Earth flat or what?
Apparently the city of Los Angeles is. I don't know about the rest of you, it's the city of LA. Close as you want on the map, and you'll find every single inch in the entire city accounted for, down to like the width of the sidewalks. You know, if a street is 2 lanes versus 3 lanes wide. The buildings are mapped by their size to the inch on their building permits. But whether you zoom in the most southern part of the city or the most northeastern part of the city, it's all a perfectly flat image. Those inches have to, they're accounted for, they have to exist somewhere. And so either they're making up land that doesn't exist, or there'd be buildings missing on their projections somewhere, or somehow they were able to take 465 square miles and perfectly flatly project it with no curvature whatsoever on a flat surface, which is something no one has yet ever figured out how to do, which is why when we look at the Mercator projection, it actually curves off. So if we were looking at a properly projected flat map of the city of LA, the outer extremities of the city should be scaled the same way that the edges of the Mercator projection. But the crazy thing about this exact software, they've found this land somewhere, and it couldn't possibly exist the way that they project it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The map of the city should look like this in order for it to be perfectly square projected. But somehow they were the first global engineers to be able to project the globe flat and in a perfect 90-degree angle square. And they never knew they did it. Either these buildings, they'd have to delete a couple buildings, or they would have to break it up like that.
So is the Earth flat or what?
Apparently the city of Los Angeles is. I don't know about the rest of you, it's the city of LA.
There are some extra weird-looking projections out there. The Dymaxion projection basically reshapes the globe so that it looks like a 20-sided die, and then strategically cuts the die in places where there just is ocean and no continent. It's bad at navigation, though, because some things that are actually quite close to each other get separated by huge areas of not map. But because the Dymaxion ends up making the land look like one continuous strip, it helps show how interconnected the world's land really is, and it's sometimes used to plot early human migration.
Gleason's new standard map of the world is the map used by most flat Earth people. On the other hand, there is another candidate, and that is the Dymaxion map. The Dymaxion map can easily be made into one round circle. Flat Earth map. Flat Earth people should be interested in Dymaxion map.
Ship captains in navigating great distances at sea never need to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their calculations. Both plane sailing and great circle sailing, the most popular navigation methods, use plane, not spherical trigonometry, making all mathematical calculations on the assumption that the Earth is perfectly flat. If the Earth were in fact a sphere, such an errant assumption would lead to constantly glaring inaccuracies. Plain sailing has worked perfectly fine in both theory and practice for thousands of years, however, and plane trigonometry has time and again proven more accurate than spherical trigonometry in determining distances across the oceans.
Let us discuss about plane sailing. The size of Earth is very large and average circumference is about 40,000 kilometers. So, small areas can be considered as flat surface. The limitations of the plane sailing is about 600 mile, that is nautical miles or so. Well, 1 nautical mile is 1.852 kilometer. So we get this much kilometer. Hence, for this much area, we can use plane trigonometry. For larger areas, say distance more than 600 miles, the curvature of Earth is very significant and we need to consider that as well. Say for example, for a small area, we'll see that this can be considered as plane.
Jerry Broughton, we're surrounded here by maps, old maps, and you're clearly fascinated by them.
They are monopolizing maps online. If you go online and you're using maps, you are probably using a Google map. And there's also some sort of sinister and worrying dimensions to Google because they buy Earth Viewer, which is the application, and that is funded by the CIA.
This is the company that they buy that provides them with the ability to produce this.
That's right.
I mean, that's interesting that the CIA government had a hand in funding it.
Who am I? I feel like since the new year, I went from 5,000 or 10,000 subscribers up to now like 38,000. So I feel like I want to give a little introduction. Obviously, my name's Tucker Gott. I've been flying since I was 15. I started taking flying lessons in an airplane. I soloed when I was 16, and I got my full license when I turned 17. I've worked in the skydive industry for the last 5 years as a parachute packer. Yeah, I skydive. I have my A license. I think I have 38 jumps now. And I've been flying paramotors since I was 18, 3.5 years ago. I have my associates in business administration. I'm currently still attending college online, and I'm digging this whole YouTube thing. Freaking sick. Yeah, so that's a very basic introduction. I figured I'd just give you guys a super quick summary rundown of who I am. So next question. Have you ever... Okay, so a lot of the traction, I think, on YouTube came from that 15,000 video where I flew up to 15,000 feet. And honestly, I've never really heard much about the flat earth movement, but it has become very apparent that a lot of people think the earth is flat. And I don't understand, but people take my video as proof that the earth is flat. I only went to 15,000 feet, but airliners fly at like 30,000 feet all day, and there's hundreds of people up there at any given point in time. So I kind of fail to understand why my video has anything to do with the flat earth thing. A question to go along with that is a lot of people ask like, oh, why do you use a GoPro with a fisheye lens? Well, I've tried narrow lenses on different cameras while flying, and it just sucks because basically you see like this much of the image, like it would be cropped in on that barn out there and you'd have no idea what was around me. But I truly think the wide angle is essential for like the point of view, kind of putting you guys in my perspective. And I don't really have any plans of giving up using GoPros. I think it's really the best camera for what I do, or action sports in general. And of course, people will comment that I'm being paid by the government to use these cameras or something. I don't even know. Crazy. Oh, so on the whole flat earth thing, if I had to give my opinion, of course, I would say the Earth is round. But take it for what it's worth, that's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looked flat, and I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, there's this flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me. But take it for what it's worth, that's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looked flat, and I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, there's this flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me. Take it for what it's worth, that's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looked flat, and I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, there's this flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me.
We often imagine that from the International Space Station, astronauts see the Earth like this, but they're just not that far away. From where they actually orbit, International Space Station residents only see about 3% of Earth's surface at any one time. And that 3% is too wide to all fit within a window. When I was in Pittsburgh, their science museum had a mock-up of part of the ISS, and as you can see, out of the window, Earth is still quite expansive.
But take it for what it's worth, that's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looked flat, and I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, there's this flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me.
Take it for what it's worth, that's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looked flat, and I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, there's this flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me.
Whether at sea level, the top of Mount Everest, or flying 100,000 feet in the air, the always horizontal horizon line always rises up to meet the eye level of the observer and remains perfectly flat. You can test for yourself on a beach or hilltop, in a large field or desert, aboard a hot air balloon or helicopter. You will see the panoramic horizon ascend with you and remain completely level all around. If the Earth were actually a big ball, however, the horizon should sink as you ascend, not rise to your eye level, and it would dip at each end of your periphery, not remain flat all around. Standing in a rising balloon, you would have to look downwards to the horizon. The highest point of the ball Earth would be directly beneath you and declining on each side.
whether any and what reason exists in nature to prevent the fall of more than 500 feet being visible to the eye, or incapable of detection by any optical or mathematical means whatsoever. This question is especially important when it is considered that at the same distance, and on the upper outline of the same land, changes of level of only a few yards extent are quickly and unmistakably perceptible. If a man is guided by evidence and reason, and influenced by a love of truth and consistency, he cannot longer maintain that the earth is a globe. He must feel that to do so is to war with the evidence of his senses, to deny that any importance attaches to the fact and experiment, to ignore entirely the value of logical process, and to cease to rely upon practical induction.
What you're seeing on screen now is a screen capture from Rob Durham's video. There's a link to his video below. Now, what he did was he plugged in, this is AutoCAD software, and it's incredibly precise. It's used by architects, engineers, pilots, anybody who needs a precision-based application. And what he did was he plugged in the radius, the diameter, the circumference of the Earth. So this is to scale. This blue line arc that you see is the curvature of the Earth exactly to scale.
If we look over here, look, the length of this is 6 miles. It's telling us it's a line and it's 6 miles long and it's 90 degrees from the horizontal. Incidentally, what I didn't show is if I select the circle itself and display the properties for it, it tells me here, look, it's a circle, it's blue, it tells me the radius, the diameter and the circumference, and as you can see, these figures here are the generally accepted dimensions of the globe. So everything's drawn to scale, perfectly to scale. Let me zoom back in. There's the 6 mile high line. If I zoom into the top of it, I've already imported the model of a Boeing 747 exactly to scale, and I've drawn a line from the passenger window, the red line here, and I've drawn it to the tangent point on the Earth. Now, you remember I said earlier that that AutoCAD won't render a circle, it'll do it as a series of straight lines. It's done it here, look. So if I type that command REA, it'll bring it to a perfect circle again. And you can see that the line here, which is the line of sight from the passenger on the plane to the horizon, it touches the circle precisely. I then drew a line back from this point horizontally to underneath the aircraft, just here, and you can see that the distance now from the horizon to the aeroplane is 11.99 miles, which is almost double the altitude of the plane above the Earth, and it conveniently actually works as double around this sort of altitude, around the 6 mile high altitude. The distance to the horizon works out to double. If you start going higher and put lines in 100 miles high and do the same exercise, it gets to slightly less than half. For instance, if I did it at 100 miles, it would be what would it be? Be about 197 miles, I think, something like that. Anyway, so it seems to conveniently work as double around this sort of altitude. So let's have a look at what this looks like from the perspective of somebody on the plane. So here, again, I've drawn the aircraft exactly to scale. Down here, is the height they are above the Earth, 6 miles. So this is directly below them. And then this is the horizon, which is a further 6 miles, giving the total of 12 miles. 12 miles. So let's have a look at the artificial horizon in the aircraft. The passengers on the plane don't experience any nose up or nose down attitude of the plane. And the instrument tells them they're flying straight and level. For all intents and purposes they are. However, the horizon is 12 miles below them. What would they need to do in order to correct it? They would need to nose down, but the instrument is reading straight and level. Doesn't work. And this is not what we see. We don't see the horizon 12 miles below us. Let's have a look at the flat Earth model. Same position, just here from the North Pole. This green line here depicts the flat Earth, and I've drawn it at about double the diameter of the globe here. So it's the same aeroplane, same height, 6 miles. This time we've drawn a line out of the window this way, right to the end of the flat Earth, wherever that may be. This is kind of the minimum distance for it, based on the commonly accepted flat Earth models. And we see that the angle from the horizontal, which is the white line here, to the angle that it is to the flat Earth horizon is 0.04 degrees. It's next to nothing. For all intents and purposes, even at the sort of smallest possible flat Earth, the horizon is at eye level. Of course, if this was an infinite plane, then the angle would be approaching 0 infinitely. One of the figures I forgot to mention is this: in the globe model, the distance from the aircraft at 6 miles cruising altitude to the horizon is this red line here, which is selected. So if I go over to the properties of it, it's 218 miles. So that's the distance to the horizon at 6 miles altitude, and that gives you an angle from the horizontal of 3.15 degrees. Still doesn't sound a lot, but over 218 miles it gives you almost 12 miles of drop. So let's just quickly wrap this up and have a look at what we actually see. Here's the aeroplane. The passengers on the aeroplane, out of both windows, they see the horizon at eye level. The instrument's reading eye level. The horizon is as it should be. All passengers are experiencing straight and level flight. It all works.
As the plane was taking off, and I just kept, the plane shaking and everything, so you're trying to hold my iPhone as best as I could at takeoff. But that horizon never changed.
I mean, it just right up with us the whole time, 37,000 feet. There it was, right out the window. It was a very hazy flight over the Gulf of Mexico all the way back to Dallas. So, my window was all water, pretty much the entire flight. But you didn't have to look out too far, and it all just kind of blends into blurry white and blue shades. So you couldn't see a hard horizon out there. But I have seen hard horizons out there at that height before, and it's flat. It's totally flat.
Take it for what it's worth. That's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looks flat. And I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, the Earth is flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me. Take it for what it's worth. That's my opinion. As far as I know, to see any curvature of the Earth, you have to go like 60 or 70,000 feet up in the air to begin to see the curvature. 15,000 feet, the horizon still looks flat. And I know flat Earth people are going to be like, oh, proof, the Earth is flat. But no, yeah, 15,000 feet, I didn't see any curvature, but I don't think you would see any curvature. So take it for what it's worth. I think the whole flat Earth thing is a bunch of craziness, but that's just me.
197. Some people claim there is no motive for such a grand-scale deception, and that flat or ball makes no difference. By removing Earth from the motionless center of the universe, these Masons have moved us physically and metaphysically from a place of supreme importance to one of complete nihilistic indifference. If the Earth is the center of the universe, then the ideas of God, creation, and a purpose for human existence are resplendent. But if the Earth is just one of billions of planets revolving around billions of stars in billions of galaxies, then the ideas of God, creation, and a specific purpose for Earth and human existence become highly implausible. By surreptitiously indoctrinating us into their scientific materialist sun worship, not only do we lose faith in anything beyond the material, we gain absolute faith in materiality, superficiality, status, selfishness, hedonism, and consumerism. If there's no God and everyone's just an accident, then all that really matters is me, me, me. They've turned Madonna, the mother of God, into a material girl living in a material world. Their rich, powerful corporations with slick sun cult logos sell us idols to worship, slowly taking over the world while we tacitly believe their science, vote for their politicians, buy their products, listen to their music and watch their movies, sacrificing our souls at the altar of materialism. To quote Morris Klein, the heliocentric theory, by putting the sun at the center of the universe, made man appear to be just one of a possible host of wanderers drifting through a cold sky. It seemed less likely that he was born to live gloriously and to attain paradise upon his death. Less likely, too, was it that he was the object of God's ministrations. 198. Some say that the idea of an intergenerational worldwide conspiracy to delude the masses sounds implausible or unrealistic. But these people need only familiarize themselves with the works and writings of Freemasons themselves, for example John Robeson, who exposed this in his 1798 book, Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, carried out in the secret meetings of the Freemasons, Illuminati, and reading societies. Supreme Commander of the 33rd Degree Albert Pike was quite forthcoming in several letters regarding the Masons' ultimate goal of world domination, and the Zionist Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, the exact plan by which this would be and has been carried out, is completely disclosed.
Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time. And then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, more humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals. Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins.
You don't believe that the Earth is round only if you're an astronaut. You don't believe Napoleon existed only if you're a historian. You believe these things because they're facts, proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
So, you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
Evolution is a fact. It's documented by science.
Right, how did that happen?
I told you we don't know. Believe these things because they're facts, proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact.
So you have no idea how it started?
Nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
That we are spiritual beings in physical bodies. We're having this physical experience, and it looks like the elite know this. So if they can cut us off from our souls, they can treat us as physical objects. They want to turn us into animals, is what they want to do. And that's what evolution is. It's taking your soul out of you. Heliocentrism is a religion where man has no soul. Man is an accident. That's why every atheist will say, oh, we're just on an insignificant planet around a dying sun, and we have no souls, and we're just egotistical monkeys. That's their way of trashing us and tearing us down and cutting us off of the fact that, no, we are spiritual beings. And so I see religion as just a way for government to get us to take our natural spirituality and plug it into them. Like they're hijacking it. And that's why I call them parasites. They're not just taking our money, they're cutting us off from our connection to our Creator, to our real self, our true, unique, spiritual identity.
Unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them.
Here's like a perfect example of them landing on the moon. I mean, it's proof right there. This is an official NASA photo of the first Apollo 11 lunar module landing on the moon. I mean, it's right there. This is proof, man. It's the picture's right there. It's landing on the moon. But the only problem I have with this picture is that it's taken from the moon. I don't know what the big deal was with being the first guy on the moon. It seems the camera crew was already there. The fucking tripod. Camera A, B, C. You know, back in the 60s, I mean, I know people who believe they saw the landing on the moon because they heard it on the radio.
On the bottom rung of the ladder. Just one more step and I'm tranquility. Holy living fuck. Are you fucking believing this? Over. We read you. Over.
I hope the two of you are not concerned about this.
I absolutely am standing on the surface of the fucking moon. I'm talking to you from the surface of the fucking moon. Jesus H. Christ in a chicken basket.
If you're going to somewhere that nobody has been before, you need to have a simulator which recreates that environment as closely as you can. 400,000 people may have worked on the program in total, but none of them had a need to know more than his own job required. The people who were making the rockets didn't know what the people who were making the spacesuits were doing, because they had no need to know about that. Their job was to make the best models and the best simulation of the lunar surface that they could. And if we come up to this picture here, we see the three scales on which these models were built. We have here the whole moon as one unit. It stands about 20 foot high. We have here behind it a section of the surface of the moon. You'll notice it's curved. And here we have a more detailed section of the lunar surface. This is a simulation rig that was built. This is the command and service module of the Apollo program. And you'll notice that the window here looks out onto a block here. And there's another one here. They're curved. These are the screens onto which the lunar surface was projected as the craft made a simulated approach. What we are looking at are films of realistic models,
bringing to the world a new awareness.
Hours. Under the heliocentric model, as the Earth travels around the Sun, each day the Earth will be a little less than 1 degree further in its orbit from the previous day. That means that every 6 months the Earth will be 180 degrees in its orbit around the Sun and be opposite the Sun from where it was 6 months earlier. There is a problem with this model. Let us assume that we begin our observation of the Sun at 12 noon in New York on September 22nd. Each solar day is precisely 24 hours in length. According to the heliocentric model, every 24-hour day, the Earth is supposed to do an exact 360-degree spin on its axis and end up at the same place. At the same time, each day the Earth has traveled a little less than 1 degree of the 360-degree orbit around the Sun. That means that after 6 months, 12 noon in New York will arrive during the middle of the dark night on March 21st. To recap, 12 noon arrives in the middle of the day in New York on our start day on September 22nd. The heliocentric theory requires the Earth to be at the opposite side of the Sun 6 months later. Consequently, New York will be on the dark side of the Earth, facing away from the Sun, at 12 noon on March 21st. In New York, therefore, on March 21st, 12 noon should arrive during the middle of the night. Under the heliocentric model, this occurrence should happen year in and year out, every year. We know, however, that does not happen, which means that the heliocentric model is wrong.
Okay, so we have the crescent moon in the sky while the sun is up. And my question is, why is it crescent if right over here, whoop, there's the sun, and then there's the moon. The sun and the sun is a straight line to the moon. It should be lighting up the whole entire moon. If that light on the moon comes from the sun, and the sun and the moon are both up at the same time, there's the sun and there's the moon, why in the fuck is it not lighting up the whole moon?
Has this ever happened to anyone else? You're out there trying to spread truth to your fellow man, teach them about the biggest lie in history, and they say, "Why would anyone ever lie to me about that?" Before they've ever looked into the subject, before they've listened to any evidence whatsoever, before they've even opened their minds a smidgen, they're already theorizing into the motives for such a conspiracy. These people are the biggest conspiracy theorists ever. They haven't seen a bit of information, and they're already theorizing about the motive of this potential conspiracy. It's like somebody walking into a homicide in their house, blood all over the walls, corpses, smells to high heaven, dead bodies on the ground. You scream, you gasp, and you turn to them, and they say, "What?" You say, well, "There's been a murder here. This is gruesome. This is bloody. This is terrible. This is disgusting. This is awful. Are you looking at this? Do you see this?" And they say, "I don't see it. Why would there be a murder here? Why do you think there's been a murder? What would be the motive for someone to murder someone in my apartment? I don't believe you, and I'm not going to open my eyes to the corpses and blood-stained walls. I'm just going to stand here and ask about the motive. Why would anyone do that?" Refuses to open his eyes, stands there with his fingers over his face, and says, "I don't see it. I don't think so. What murder? What smell? Why would anyone murder someone in my apartment? I'm just gonna go to bed." He lays down in the bed, moves the dead corpses to the side, blood all over his hands, sucks his thumb and goes right to sleep thinking, "Oh, even if it was flat, it doesn't affect my life at all." Lays in a pool of somebody else's blood. You're crazy, man. Flat Earth. Can you imagine if you were a police cadet making this rookie mistake as you happened upon your first crime scene? Before investigating even a little bit, you start asking your officer in charge, what might the motive be? He's busy gathering evidence. He's busy putting evidence in plastic bags, brushing fingerprints. Meanwhile, you're behind him, poking him in the shoulder, asking why, like a little 3-year-old child. But why? Incapable of looking at physical evidence, unable to suspend your disbelief for even a second, unable to critically think, to be skeptical of the establishment worldview long enough to look at the facts and evidence before wondering about your crazy conspiracy theory motive. See, this is the funny part. I'm giving you conspiracy facts, but you'd rather entertain your anti-conspiracy theory of how nobody would have a motive to lie about the shape of the Earth. Well, sorry, I'm not a conspiracy theorist like you people who refuse to look at evidence. I'm a conspiracy realist who's seen the evidence and is aware of the fact that the Earth is flat and motionless. And continuing to whine about the why is just your defense mechanism. Just a wall you put up in front of yourself so you don't have to take the time to research it, and so that you don't have to be the crazy person believing the Earth is flat, because you actually did your due diligence and found out you have been lied to.
The Communist Manifesto laid out the ideology of communism. Its key points include a central bank with monopoly on credit, abolition of countries and nationalities, abolition of the traditional family consisting of a man, a woman, and children, abolition of private property, which means no rights for the people, to make it impossible for people to earn a livelihood by introducing heavy taxation, confiscation of property, abolition of the right of inheritance, a communist state, a communist monopoly on credit and banking, the media in total control of the communists. Women should not focus on family and children anymore. In their own words, communism wants to do away with the status of women as mere instrument of production. Abolition of Christianity and morality. Marx refers to this totalitarian regime as dictatorship of the proletariat, and his cult followers promote violence, class envy, hostility towards free markets, family, business, tradition, and Christianity. Today, they are instrumental in the destabilization of Europe. Marx also openly encouraged genocide against Slavs, referring to them as racial trash and that they must perish in a revolutionary holocaust.
It has to be true. Why would they lie or hide this? Which is exactly how they've programmed you to react. Stop. Please step back and critically think for a moment. The question isn't why would they lie? The question is, why would they tell us the truth? If land and knowledge are wealth and power, why would the elites and governments share it with the peon slave masses who they openly state they want to depopulate? One of the hardest, if not the hardest, psychological undertakings anyone will ever attempt in their lifetime is to have an open enough mind to consider new information contrary to their unquestionable beliefs. Then, to become self-aware enough to recognize the need for and the importance of questioning their foundational understandings of the earth.
What I'm thinking here. And I'll let you think this through with me. Okay, let's just imagine a world as a beach ball. All right, the lines of the ball clearly point out what so many in the ball earth camp are blatantly ignoring. A ball, by its very nature, demands that its surface immediately begins to curve downward and away from any point on it. So if we imagine Poser James here, I'm using a software called Poser, let's call him PJ for short. If we imagine him standing on the beach ball, the problem becomes immediately apparent. Okay, he's standing on a ball. Immediately the ball is curving downward and away from his feet in all directions. That's what a ball does. And it doesn't matter how big the person is, nor does it matter how big the ball is. But let's go ahead and shrink PJ and enlarge the ball for the sake of example here. Now, notice the lines are still curving downward and away in all directions, even though he's getting smaller and the ball is getting bigger. This never changes with scale. Okay, now let's zoom into tiny PJ on the massive ball here and consider the curvature word problem that was brought up by this individual serving in Iraq. If PJ was 6 feet tall and he had a clone, who was also 6 feet tall, right, who walked 1 mile away from him, the ground his clone would be standing on would be 8 inches lower than the ground that he was standing on, right? Again, the curvature math is 8 inches per mile squared. So the first mile, 1 times 1 is 1 times 8 is 8 inches. So the ground from point A to point B is going to be 8 inches below point A. All right, you with me so far? Now, if the clone had a clone who walked another mile away, that clone's ground would be 32 inches below PJ's ground. Why? Because it's 8 inches per mile squared. 2 miles, okay, 2 times 2 is 4 times 8 is 32. So the ground that clone number 2 is standing on is 32, almost 3 feet below the ground that PJ is standing on. And if we had yet another clone who was to walk 1 more mile, his ground would be 72 inches or 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head would be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. I know for some of you the gerbil just jumped off the wheel, so let's look at it again. This time we'll check it out from a different angle. Again, PJ's clone walks 1 mile away. The top of his head would be 8 inches lower than PJ's. Another clone walks an additional mile, and the top of his head is then 32 inches below PJ's. The third clone walks 1 more mile, and at just 3 miles away from PJ, the ground clone number 3 is standing on is 6 feet below PJ's. Thus, the top of clone number 3's head is going to be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. Now, I'm not trying to see whether or not the person can see the other person. What I'm trying to show you is the issue of the ground level. The ground level is the issue that I'm focused on with this example. Because if clone number 3's ground is 72 inches below the ground that PJ is standing on, it's going to be physically impossible for PJ to look straight ahead or to the left or the right or behind him and ever expect to see the horizon at his eye level. It cannot be done.
An object that moving away from an observer on water always rises upwards, which proves that the Earth is an infinitely flat surface.
It's always this way. Okay, they got this target, over here, and the observer over here, and this big bulge in the middle. And that's what all these ballers would have you believe, is that everything you're looking at is on the other side of a big bulge. You're going to have to walk or drive or swim or take a boat or fly over to get to. And somebody else has done videos on how big that bulge would be if you're flying from like Los Angeles to Hawaii. I mean, it gets quite absurd when you start putting it into these terms. But let me just simplify all of this for you and bring PJ back into the picture. Now, he's standing on top of the ball, right? But I'm going to slide him over to the observation point here. Now, I'm keeping him perpendicular to the ground. Now, do you see the problem? The only way he could be looking toward the top of the bulge is if he's tilting his head down. He'd have to be looking down. He couldn't be standing straight up, looking straight out. The only way he's going to see the curve is if he's looking down. Let's keep PJ looking straight ahead, and I'm going to slide him down so that his eyeball essentially ends up on the ground, looking straight out. And you're going to see the problem here. Look, at ground level, if his eyeball is on the ground and he's looking straight out, the ground is beginning to immediately curve downward. There's no bulge. There's no bulge.
You'll notice a similar problem if you stand on a seashore and try to watch a boat sail away. After a while, it will disappear from view. And not only that, but the bottom of the boat will vanish before the top as it goes over what's called the horizon line, the place where the sky meets the earth.
As opposed to false globe, science boats seem to climb upwards with increased distance when they go to the horizon. The picture to the right shows the ship seen from a higher angle, which rises higher with a steeper angle on the horizon than the ship on the left seen from a lower angle. This proves that ocean is an infinite plane surface.
common observations they're going to accept and or ignore. Here's an interesting video I saw online regarding a full day time lapse revealing superior mirages. Now, this is quite extraordinary, actually. This is from skunkbayweather.com, September 7th, 2012. Notice the buildings and the shoreline here over on the left keep your eye on that. Just watch that, and the mountain in the background. Everything's pretty cool. You can see pretty much everything there, but as the day progresses, and we are now at 9:30 a.m. and it's 59 degrees, 60 degrees. It's getting warmer, the temperature is changing. We start to see some miraging take place, right? It starts to distort things a little bit. Ooh, look at that. The water seems like it's getting higher, and we're losing buildings, and we're losing the beach. Here it is now, noon. 63 degrees and climbing. Uh-oh. There it goes. Oh, there it is again. Oh, it's all miraged. Huh. It's all distorted. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. The default is to see it, though. That's the point. The default is minus distorting atmospheric conditions, you would be able to see everything clearly. But due to different temperature variations and density in the atmosphere and whatnot, sometimes you can see the whole shoreline and the buildings, sometimes you can't. But the magic trick is not in being able to see it. It's what is taking place that obscures your ability to do so. Look at this. And the mountains in the background shrink and expand and everything too. You know, I would suggest that you hit pause on this video and rewind and watch that back and forth a few times. In fact, I'll put the link in the show notes below, because I sped this up. I made it only 2 minutes long instead of 4 minutes long. So you can watch the whole thing in a little bit slower motion there. But I mean, look at the comparison right here, just in these two images right here. The one on the right at 5:44 p.m., 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Can't really see anything on the left shoreline there. And on the left at 9:43 a.m., when it was 59.5 degrees Fahrenheit, we can see the shoreline, we can see buildings, trees, all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, either this lake is, you know, filling up and draining so that the water level is higher or lower, or it's due to atmospheric lensing and distortions, refraction, and all that good stuff, causing us to not be able to see it at certain times. I think that's exactly what's going on Lake Michigan.
Jenna Freda, and it's an incredible video of Jenna zooming her camera across a lake at a distance of over 30 miles. And as you can clearly see right here, you can see almost the entirety of the city with just a bit of the street obscured from view. And then she shows a shot at the end of the video of the city skyline and then a screenshot from her video. And they look pretty damn close.
It cannot be a localized effect. This has to affect all bodies of water. If the moon, the gravitational pull of the moon causes the tides, then sure as hell the gravitational pull of the Earth is going to force bodies of water to conform to its gravitational field. And if the Earth is spherical, the gravitational field will be spherical. You're not going to get flat bodies of water. It wouldn't work that way. Now, stop trying to put words in my mouth and tell me I said something I didn't say. If you think about it, we never question water. We're told water's flat, right? Finds its own level. We use it in levels. Carpenters use it. But we're also told that ships disappear over the curve, over the edge. And if that's true, then the same should be true here. Like that house should be over the edge, or the water level should be like up into the house. You should not be able to see the rocks. Look, that one tree, you can see where the water has eroded under it. And right there's a beach, right at water level. You can't have it both ways. You can't have ships going over the curve of the Earth and not having things on other bodies of water be hidden. Without some creative explaining. I don't know what's going on. I just find it puzzling.
besides the obvious flat horizon, take a look at this video footage with a Nikon P900 digital camera as you zoom in here at the sun, which many people would believe it's behind the ball Earth. When you zoom in, you see the sun above the horizon. Okay, this 100% without a shadow of a doubt proves the whole idea, which I've talked about many times. The sun basically looking like it's setting behind the ball Earth. It's due to perspective. Okay? Again, take a look here. So many people point this out as you see the sun appearing to set as the proof we live in a ball, when again, I talk about it all the time, it's due to perspective. Just like these telephone poles being the same height from a distance, but as, of course, you drive down a road, a street, as you get closer, of course, they're not going to be this short. Just like the whole entire concept, again, with the sun being zoomed in. I think I want
going down. So everyone who's been asking me about the sun setting, okay, I want to deal with that. The sun doesn't actually go down. It doesn't go down anywhere. It just goes further away from you. So let's deal with that. All right. Now here's sun number 1. All right. And here's sun number 2. Okay. All right. So now sun number 1, sun number 2, I drew a line between them to show you that they're on an equal plane. Okay, they're equal. Okay, and they're parallel to each other, but appears to be higher than sun number 2. But they're not. The line is actually parallel. It's leveled. So sun number 2 appears to be going down, but it's not going down. It's just going further away from you. So the sun doesn't set. It goes beyond where the ground and the sky meet from your line of perspective. Okay? So when you're looking at this, let's go right here. Where's my buddy? Where's my buddy? There goes my buddy. All right. Now, sun number 1 appears to him, if he's standing here, from his perspective, sun number 1 would look like it's higher. It would look like it's coming up. It's not coming up. It's just closer. And sun number 2 would appear to be going down, but it's not going down. It's just going further away. Okay, this is the law of perspective we just looked at. Okay, so this is also on a flat earth, right? Okay, and let's take a look. Let's go over to sun number 2. Okay, and we're by sun number 2. We're going to go down. We're going to be standing in the ocean. Okay, we're on a boat. Okay, now let's do this here. All right, now sun number 2 appears to be higher than sun number 1. It appears the sun number 1 is setting, but it's not. It's just further away from you. So depending on where you're standing will depend on how the sun looks, whether it's going down or not. Okay, so neither one of them, they're both on the same plane. Okay, so the sun never sets. For everybody who's asking me about the sun setting, it's impossible for the sun set on a flat earth. It's not. It's actually an illusion, and I wouldn't even call it an illusion because it's pretty obvious.
My experiment. So here's what I came up with. I've got my magnifying sheet frame, and I created a little stand to paste the sun on it and keep it the same height over the flat surface of a table. So the sun is always going to be parallel with the surface. And check this out. All right, here's the first test of a sun moving over a flat surface, and with no atmospheric magnification, it does what we might expect it would. It gets smaller as it goes away from us. All right, now let's see what happens when we add in our atmospheric magnification. Again, water and refraction. Water causes magnification and refraction, right? So let's bring the sun back. Oh, check this out. Refraction bends the light downward. It made the sun set on a parallel surface. As it was moving parallel, the same height, the whole way over a flat surface, the refraction caused the sun to set. Not only that, well, let's bring in the beginning of that little test, and we see that it maintained pretty much the same size, too. Pretty close. And of course, that's because as it's moving away, the magnification is still taking place, and so even though the sun's further away than it was in the beginning of the test, the magnification basically preserved the same size, and the refraction made it set. Now, I'm just going to put forward a crazy idea for you to think about, and that is, if Rob Skiba could figure this out, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I think it's quite possible that the creator of the cosmos could have figured out the same thing and engineered our beautiful sunsets, thanks to all that water he placed in our atmosphere. Just something to think about.
So I can show you a picture of the sun setting in the desert where it's very dry, and you'll see the sun shrink and shrink into a tiny, tiny pinprick before it disappears into the horizon. And then I can show you another video of on a more over the ocean, say on a more humid day, the sun is going to actually expand a little bit due to the atmosphere and then disappear into the horizon like a big ball, as many people have seen it. But either way that it disappears, whether it disappears into a pinprick before leaving the horizon or it expands and goes down the horizon, it's simply moving away from your perspective, as we talked about. It's not actually going down, just like a row of street lamps aren't getting shorter and shorter as they get farther and farther away from you. It's just an element of perspective.
Some folks say that it would be impossible to be nighttime and daytime on a flat Earth at the same time. But if you actually looked, then you would know that it's completely possible, because the sun is closer and smaller. Here's a video from an Alaskan cruise.
You probably wouldn't believe this if we didn't show you. Here's out our balcony. It's about 10 o'clock at night. It's almost dark. It's amazing. You can see the moon shining and reflecting brilliantly on the water. But then as you pan to the left, it's actually still daylight over here. And the sunset. Look at that beauty. And it won't ever completely settle over there. It will stay light actually the whole night. But over here, the moon rising out of there.
It's day and night at the same time, just in that area alone. Of course it would be possible on a bigger scale.
So for this video, I wanted to look at the zigzag argument. This popular argument appears to have gained momentum from a video posted by Mr. Thrive and Survive that shows a 24-hour time-lapse of the sun taken from north of the Arctic Circle. So the Arctic Circle is a line of latitude approximately 66 degrees north of the equator. The region north of this circle is the Arctic. This is where the sun can be visible for 24 continuous hours at least once per year. Around June 21st, the sun reaches its northernmost point away from the equator at about 23.4 degrees north latitude. This is known as the summer solstice. During this time, it's possible for the sun to be visible at local midnight, so that's why this natural phenomenon is appropriately called the midnight sun. So the video that Mr. Thrive and Survive uses in his video is titled The Arctic Midnight Sun. In it you see a 24-hour time-lapse of the sun as it travels across the sky. During this 24-hour period, the sun rises and falls, but it never drops below the horizon. It stays visible the entire time. Notice how the cameraman has to follow the sun by continuously rotating the camera to the right. Mr. Thrive and Survive stated that this would not occur if the Earth was spinning. He says the cameraman would have to rotate to the right for 12 hours and then rotate to the left for 12 hours. He explains it like this.
So at 6 a.m. you're here, all right, and you're looking at the sun. Now what happens when it comes to 6 hours later, okay? Or actually at 6 p.m. you're going to rotate all the way around to here, okay? 12 noon, you're going to be in between, right? So, okay, the observer is looking to the left to see the sun. Got that? And the Earth is the one that turns. Okay, now it's 12 noon, okay? The observer sees the sun straight out, okay? Which means when the observer was down here, what happened? They were looking to the left, and now they're looking straight out. That means the sun has appeared to move to the right in the sky. Try to imagine that. Try to imagine what I'm saying there, okay? Okay, now at 6 p.m., remember below this Arctic Circle, they're now seeing sunset, okay? The sun is setting in the sky, correct? Everything looks good, all right? Below the equator here, they would see sunset, correct? Below the equator here, below the Arctic Circle here, pardon me, you would see the sun directly overhead at noon. Now what has happened? The observer has to look to his right to see the sun. All righty? Are you starting to get this yet? Let's go another 3 hours up, all right? Midnight. The observer has rotated all the way around to here. And remember the last time the observer saw the sun to his right, okay? And now he's looking straight out again. So the sun would appear to move what? To his left.
So from the perspective of an observer on Earth, the sun would appear to move through the sky in one direction for 12 hours and then stop and start moving the opposite direction for 12 hours. As an observer spins with the Earth, the sun would create a zigzag motion in the sky. To see another example of this, a YouTuber named My Perspective has a great animation demonstrating this argument. As the cameraman moves along with the Earth, he would have to look left to right and then right to left to keep the sun in frame. So now that we understand the argument, I'd like to see if there are any possible ways both Earth models could explain what we are seeing in the video. What would an observer most likely see if the sun rotated over and around a flat stationary Earth? So first we need an observer above the Arctic Circle and a sun 23 degrees above the equator. Great. So since the sun is moving to the right in the video, it would have to be moving in a clockwise direction. As the sun moves away from the observer, it would appear to fall towards the horizon and shrink in size. As the sun starts to move closer to the observer, it would appear to rise and grow bigger in size. So in theory, what we see in the video could be explained by a sun circling above a stationary Earth. It would appear to rise and fall as it got closer and farther away from the observer. So at this point, it does appear to be a plausible explanation. Okay, so then the next question would be, can it also be explained on the heliocentric model? So according to Mr. Thrive and Survive and My Perspective, it can't.
The sun began its journey at the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice, where it made its fastest and largest circle over the Earth. For the next 3 months, every day the sun slightly narrowed its path and slowed its speed until by the spring equinox the sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Capricorn to the equator. Then for the next 3 months, again, every day, the sun continued to slightly narrow its path and slow its speed until the summer solstice, when the sun made its smallest, slowest circle around the Tropic of Cancer. Once the sun reached this innermost circle, like the ribbons and dancers around the maypole, the sun would then begin its opposing, widening, quickening journey back to the Tropic of Capricorn. For the next 3 months, every day the sun slightly widened its path and hastened its speed until the autumnal equinox the sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Cancer back to the equator. Then for the next 3 months again, every day the sun continued to slightly widen its path and hasten its speed until the winter solstice, when the sun made its largest, fastest circle around the Tropic of Capricorn, and the annual journey began again.
Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters, and debunkers. Here is another beautiful sunset off the west coast of Phuket in southern Thailand. And I'd like to use this footage to illustrate several points that can be used as evidence or even proof that we are on a level plane with a small local sun orbiting above our heads. So I'll just let this footage loop as we make a few observations. One thing to point out is that the camera is resting on the sand, not very high above the water. Now the black lines that I've superimposed on top of the footage show the width of the sun when I first started recording it, and as you can clearly see, the sun does appear to get smaller and smaller as it sinks towards the horizon. Another thing we can see happening is the sun appearing to veer off to the right, and as I'm facing west, then that is actually heading in a northerly direction. So here is a screen grab from timeanddate.com showing Phuket with a red star and the sun in the position it was at sunset, which was about 6:30 p.m. on the 23rd of February. And we can see here that the sun is actually not in line with us from Phuket. It's down further south, which would have been left on the footage of the sunset, but we actually saw the sun veer off to the right, which would mean it actually was heading in a more northerly direction. And on this map you would expect the sun to be further up north, not down south, compared to what we see. So how do we rectify this conflict? We simply turn the map into a flat Earth map, and we can see now that the line going west, that was a straight line, is now a curved line going in a clockwise direction, just how we would circumnavigate the flat Earth. And you can see that as the sun follows that line, it would actually veer off to the right, or appear to veer off northwards from our viewing position in Phuket. So let's just go back to that footage one more time with the lines so that we can see as the sun gets further away, it is in fact appearing to do that circular motion in a clockwise direction off to the right.
Okay, so this is the ultimate definitive evidence that the flat Earth believers, those who understand the Earth is flat and operate according to this model right here, are correct. I have the ultimate proof. I just found a needle in a haystack, literally a needle in a haystack. Admiral Byrd went back and did an Antarctic expedition some 50, 60, 70 years ago. You can see all about it. It's amazing. I just found a needle in a haystack. 3 words in an entire 2-hour documentary, because I watched it. 3 words that prove that this model is true. As you can see, according to this model, this is the flat Earth model. People who believe in the flat Earth know the Earth is flat. You know, say that the Earth works like this. It's flat with an outer ice wall, an ice ring that surrounds the outer wall. Now, of course, that outer ice ring, the people who have promoted the lie that the Earth is a globe, they just crunch all that up into one mass on the other side and say it's the South Pole or the Antarctic, when in reality it's not. They have only visited outskirts of the inner ice ring at various locations, and that's where Admiral Byrd went to, was certain areas of the inner part of the outer ice ring. And what's amazing, what proves it, is we know that this video here is actually showing how the sun works as it circles wide and then circles in during the summer closer to the center of the Earth, to the North Pole. The center of the Earth is what we would call the North Pole. So obviously in the summer, the sun is closer to the center, and then it starts going out back wide again in the winter, and hence we have our winter when the sun is out on the outside. I've always known, I grew up knowing, hearing about how in the summertime, At the North Pole, there's 3 months. I've heard people say 6 months, 3 months of daylight, where there's just daylight in the North Pole. And a lot of times people get confused, and they confuse that with the South Pole. Oh, there's 3 months or 6 months of daylight or darkness in the South Pole, the North Pole. They always just get it confused. The simple fact of the matter is there's 3 months of sunlight in the North Pole. And here is the needle in a haystack I just found. I always understood that it was 6 months of darkness in the at the South Pole, which actually would be consistent still with the sun coming more towards the center and being away from the outer ring. Therefore, there'd be darkness out here for a long period of time. Well, check this out. Here is a needle in a haystack. Here is the proof from this video right here, a documentary footage over an hour long, actually, hour and 10 minutes. Admiral Byrd was down there, and his ships were about to get, stuck in ice that was, starting to solidify around the ships. So they had to move the ships out, but Admiral Byrd stayed behind and listened to what the narrator says.
To get his men out, he must hope the icebreaker can crash her way back in time. Otherwise, he and his men will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter.
Otherwise, he and his men will be left behind for the 9 sunless months. You heard it right there. 9 sunless months of the Antarctic winter. Let's just hear that one more time. It was right about at 51:38. Let's try that. 9 sunless months. That proves it. That's proof positive.
To get his men out, he must hope the icebreaker can crash her way back in time. Otherwise, he and his men will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter.
Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months.
Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months. Will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter.
Frozen in for the 9 sunless months. So let's go back to our flat Earth model. The sun begins to circle overhead closer to the North Pole, giving the 3 months of daylight in the North Pole. And 9 months on the outside, it's dark, baby. You got 9 months of sunlessness on the outer ring. It's right there. That's proof positive. That statement, those 3 words, 9 sunless months, is consistent with this flat Earth model. There's proof positive, my friends. Thank you very much. And enjoy your day on this beautiful flat Earth.
Hello, fellow flat earthers. I wanted to show you a book I picked up at a local secondhand bookstore yesterday. This is a Hammond's Contemporary World Atlas. This copyright 1971. You flip past the first few pages, which are the table of contents and the area, population, some basic stats. Third page right there. It's pretty much the only alternate map that they have in this, aside from the individual maps of each country and breaking it down by state and all that fun stuff that you'd expect to see. This is your classic flat Earth map. They call it a polar projection. This map has been prepared with the North Pole as the mathematical center. From it, distances to any part of the world may be measured. On Mercator's map of the world, the polar regions are so scattered that their relatively small area and availability for flight routes are disregarded. Today, with airplanes following great circle courses, often within the Arctic Circle, polar projection maps are indispensable to the people of this air-minded age. So I found that pretty interesting, the great circle courses. So this is really intended for pilots, right? That's what is implied.
43. If Earth was a ball, there are several flights in the southern hemisphere which would have their quickest, straightest path over the Antarctic continent, such as Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia, Instead of taking the shortest, quickest route in a straight line over Antarctica, all such flights detour all manner of directions away from Antarctica, instead claiming the temperature's too cold for airplane travel. Considering the fact that there are plenty of flights to, from, and over Antarctica, and NASA claims to have technology keeping them in conditions both far colder and far hotter than any experienced on Earth, such an excuse is clearly just an excuse, and these flights aren't made because they are impossible.
One flight that should be a simple 11-hour shot across the Indian Ocean is from Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia. However, this flight takes a detour north, stopping in either Dubai, Hong Kong, or Malaysia to refuel, for a total flight time averaging over 18 hours. This ridiculously wayward detour is frustrating to say the least, but on the flat Earth map starts to make sense. Another quick and easy flight, you would think, is from Johannesburg to Santiago, Chile. While an easy 12-hour flight below the Tropic of Capricorn is to be expected, instead every flight crosses the equator to refuel in Senegal, all the way near the Tropic of Cancer, for a total flight time of 19 hours. Though it doesn't make sense on the globe, as you can see it fits perfectly on the flat Earth map. A third flight from Johannesburg is to São Paulo, Brazil, which should be a direct 10-hour flight across the 25th degree south latitude, but instead every flight crosses into the north to stop in London to refuel, making the total flight time 24 hours. From Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia, a straight 15-hour flight across the South Pacific is expected, despite refueling options in either New Zealand or any island in the South Pacific. The flight stops all the way at Los Angeles to refuel before continuing south to its destination. As already stated, these detours make no sense on the globe, but are explained and work perfectly well on the flat Earth map, having the North Pole at the center. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask
the routes.
Okay, well, I wanted to show you about this map here. This is called the Air Map of the World. This was used by the Army Air Force during World War II, and it has on it the routes that people would take, flyers would take, and the mileage between the points. And I noticed two special things about two routes here. And one is goes from San Francisco all the way to Tokyo, which is right here. And there's two stops along the way. So you have Alaska, the tip of Alaska, and you have the Kamchatka Peninsula between those 2 points. And there's mileage numbers between those legs of the journey. And it totally makes sense. This is what the Air Force is telling you how to get from San Francisco to Tokyo. They're saying take this route, which hits Alaska and the Kamchatka.
Which is why when they have the emergency landings, they land in Alaska.
Exactly. Because they were coming from, was it the Philippines? Something like that. So yeah, Asia up here. So when you look at the globe, it makes absolutely no sense because it looks like they're making a tour around the Ring of Fire. Well, this is the Ring of Fire. There's no ring, by the way. Yep. It's going from San Francisco direct route, boom, to Tokyo. And it makes absolutely no sense on the globe. But here, the government, the Air Force is telling you this is how you get from one to the other.
There we go.
The direct route. Let me show you this other one. This is from New York, and when you leave the United States, the farthest point here on this part is Newfoundland here. And then this direct route to Moscow, you hit this point right here, which is Iceland. And if you Google it and you say, I want to go from New York to Moscow, it shows you this huge arc. And you have to say, now wait a minute, why is there this huge arc? Why don't they just go directly from one to another?
Yeah.
Well,
The plane's not making a curved flight. That wouldn't make any sense. Planes fly in straight lines. So
they have to hit Iceland on the way.
Interesting.
Back then, they had to refuel. Planes couldn't make that enough. So that's the government telling them, the Air Force telling them, this is how you go from New York area to Moscow, is you have to go to Iceland. And on the globe, it's just this big old arc, which makes you ask, why do they have to do that?
Yeah.
That's why.
Yep. And plane flights are level. Gyroscopes wouldn't work on a globe. The FAA trains pilots on the Target Generation Facility. And the Target Generation Facility is a simulator for Earth, and it's a flat Earth simulator, and it also doesn't account for gravity or the spin of the Earth. So if you want to argue that the Earth's a spinning globe, go talk to the government, because they think it's flat. So
that's right. And how do you like Nathan's new hat?
Yep. Boom.
Intrepid Explorer.
And Miguel gave me the shirt. Man, flat earthers are the coolest people ever. I love you guys. Peace out. God bless.
I like to give credit where credit is due, and the long haul title was given to me by a fellow flat earther who did some of the same research I did. The summary of the video is this. If you are looking to show someone how to view the flat earth from a practical point of view, this is the example I would use. I'm going to show you how strange the world looks using just a few websites, some simple math, a couple minutes, and your brain. You don't have to write anything down, unless you want to, of course. I'll give you everything you need on screen and break down one of the examples as well. I'll also link the sites in the description for reference. First, here are some websites that help you calculate distance. The GPS on your phone already does this, and you may have an app as well, but here are some dedicated examples. Timeanddate.com, tripit.com, distancefrom2.net, worldatlas.com, freemaptools.com, and travelmath.com. If your favorite isn't listed here, like Google Maps, then use whatever is most familiar to you. Now we are going to look at two specific groups of cities. The first group is going to be from the area around Australia, including New Zealand. We'll call this Group 1. Group 1 includes Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, Perth, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, and Hamilton, New Zealand. The second group is going to be some cities in South America, all in the southern hemisphere. I mention this because if you go high enough, you will run into a few cities that won't work. Group 2 includes Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Brasilia, Brazil, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Lima, Peru, and Santiago, Chile. Again, there is a link in the description with many other airports. Now, these two groups are interchangeable, as you would imagine, so you can start or end with either Group 1 or 2. The results will be the same, and just to make it interesting, I'll use a slightly different example which a fellow flat earther did the legwork on and show you that even these two groups aren't exclusive. So you take anything from Group 1 and anything from Group 2 and you get some distances ranging from 6,000 to 8,000 miles roughly. That's all I want you to do here is get that part in your head, noticing that the route is bent because they have to account for the curvature of the Earth. All these directions are what you would expect, a straight shot over the South Pacific Ocean. Now, just to prove it's not an exclusive route, instead of starting in, say, Rio and landing in Auckland, I'll start what should be the opposite side, in Cape Town, South Africa, which is roughly the same distance on a globe Earth coming in at 7,300 miles. Notice on the map it's still a straight shot through the Indian Ocean and not crossing any countries. An easy route. I try to book my flight. For this example, we use TravelMath, but you can use whatever is easiest in your country, like Priceline, Expedia, Travelocity. It will make no difference because they're all tied to the same system. And this is when everything goes wrong. So the first leg, the airlines don't send me due east, but instead shoot me 4,700 miles almost due north to Dubai. Okay, maybe we're just picking up people. It seems a bit excessive, but I'll go with it. I'm probably comfortable in my seat drinking vodka tonics anyway. And from Dubai, it should be a straight shot home to Auckland, right? No. Now they send me southeast to Melbourne, a mere 7,300 miles. And then finally a third leg from Melbourne to Auckland coming in at around 1,600 miles. I'm rounding up or down to make the math easier. Regardless, the total miles for this flight is almost double what should be expected, coming in at 13,600 miles. In addition, the trip took me 37 hours. How long should it have taken? Well, in a 777, about 12. Now this is where you come in and say, well, it's probably an isolated incident, or some strange connection thing. You know how the airlines are. Oh no, my friends. We can do this all day. This roulette table is rigged, and there is no way to get a fair game. The first part of the clue is the utter lack of non-stop flights from anywhere in this hemisphere, which is why I gave you multiple cities in each group. And here's the plot hole for you. Flying from international cities like Sydney, Rio, Santiago, or anywhere else close by, you can't get a single non-stop flight, no matter how much money you pay. I tried to do this for an entire night, and it was like playing an online casino game, one that I was losing most of the time. The connections kept coming in like spam windows. Start in Christchurch, go to Auckland. Start in Auckland, go to Sydney. Start in Sydney, go to Dubai, or Los Angeles, or somewhere else that makes no sense. Some of these connections took the trip over 50 hours to complete. Go ahead, try it yourself. You may find one nonstop. But even then, the strangeness doesn't end there, because the speed is wrong. For reference, I included an optimum cruising speed guide from a commercial pilots forum that lists all the international aircraft used in these routes. A 777, the current state-of-the-art flagship plane, designed for maximum fuel efficiency, has a cruising speed of 640 miles an hour. 7,400 miles comes in at around 12 hours. Try to find this route. It doesn't exist. It can't. The closest I came was a one-connection flight with a 3-hour layover. The total flight time was 20 hours. 20 take away 3 is 17, not 12. And this might work if the plane was doing, say, 430 miles an hour. But it's not. In fact, the slowest cruising speed I found was an older Airbus just around 593. But this is all just numbers, right? It is until you pull up the flat Earth map and look at the farthest 2 points, which just coincidentally are anywhere in Australia and most of South America. Or my example of Lower Africa, which you can see isn't west at all. It's a shell game, and a very good one at that. Keep people guessing with multiple connections and layovers, jumping from city to city. People just sit in their seats, trying to sleep through it. And then it hits you. Well, the pilots would know, right? They fly all day, every day. Certainly, they would have figured it out by now.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm here with present airline pilot who flies all over North America and around, has seen this world from above, and I had a chance to meet him about a year ago, right?
Correct.
And, well, his name's Joe, so everybody say hi to Joe. The reason his face is blurred out is because he is currently a pilot, and this would be a conflict of interest?
Correct, yeah. We're all of our companies make us sign an agreement where we're not allowed to speak to any media and any questions. Actually, any pilot has presented to them in the United States by any media organization needs to be directed to our company spokesperson and or union representatives. Basically, they don't want any of us talking to any media about anything, not just crash and incidents, but
flight experience, anything?
Correct.
Which is kind of interesting, wouldn't you say? Seems that's a pretty good wall of defense to keep anything that you might be seeing out there in the air. What an airline pilot thinks of what this Earth looks like. So you've been looking into the flat Earth concept for how long?
I've been looking into
It's a quick video here, hopefully quick video. This is an old book. It's The World in Maps, and this is a picture in the book. Here's the cover, Atlas of the World. And found this interesting. This book is from 1989, and pretty interesting thing here. Let's see. Set it in here. There it is. Revised edition 1989. So I found this picture. It says this is below a satellite view of Earth. So you can see this. This is a satellite view of Earth. Now, as you can see South America right here. Very interesting. And they cut it like this too. So square pictures were usually for everything. I never seen a round picture like this just taken from a camera. So this was obviously cropped or cut so they can make it circle where the equator is supposed to be. My point here is that when you look at this globe here, you see right here Central America. Central America, Central America. Right there. Right? Central America, same thing. Right there. Now when you look down on a round globe, Central America is way over here. So if you look at the picture like that, you can't even see Central America. It's only the equator. So you're taking a picture like this, you're not going to be able to see Central America right there. And here's South America. Can't see that at all. It's around the globe. And look, if you're looking down like this, complete opposite side of the equator. But look at, they cut it right there because they knew that it was the equator, and you could see it. Look how flat it looks. Look at that. No curvature, no angle, just perfect flat. Everything looks flat. Look how flat this looks. Right here. There's Africa. Right here. Right there. The equator. And it's right here. Again, if you look down on it, you can't see that from this angle. But in this picture, satellite photo, you can see it. 1989. So, like I'm saying, do your research, look in books, you'll find stuff. Most importantly, to everybody, do your research, do tests. If you heard something that someone said is something and you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. You know, you don't have to say that you know everything because you learned it in school. And don't be afraid to, speak your mind, ask questions, and find out the truth for yourself. You don't have to call out other people or argue with people about it. Just flat out say you don't know because you've never been this high in space or in know, and it's on a satellite. So until you figure it out for yourself, you know, don't argue with other people. Just simply say you don't know, and that's it. Doesn't matter until you know. All right. So leave it with that. This is an actual satellite photo of Earth. Look how flat that is. And the globe. This actually has a North Pole on it. Look at the ice. This is so old. They still had it up there before it melted. Just to show you Antarctica. There you go.